Welcome, everyone. This is the webinar for high-performing remote teams. We're Lumen, and at Lumen, we believe that the future belongs to creation leaders. We ask the question, are you creating the solution, or are you constantly reacting to the challenge? And today, we are gathering to actually create the solutions to how we rapidly move our teams effectively to work remotely. My name is Maya Zuckerman. I'm the COO of Lumen, and I'd like to introduce you to Tirza Hollenhurst, who's the CEO of Lumen. Hi, Tirza, to you.
Hi, welcome everyone. I am really delighted to be joining all of you for this webinar, and there's going to be various opportunities to get your voices on the line if you're able, and if you're not, I totally understand. And we are going to be going through a lot of information, and I know that at this time a lot of us have a great deal of information coming at us, and so we're going to focus in on a couple key points though, and those will be the Connect, Scan, Focus, Act format for meetings, creating psychological safety, and a clearing practice for handling the small mishaps. And then finally, really just looking at the overall mindsets. So those are some of the highlights of the things that we're going to be going over today. And after this webinar, not only will you get the recording, but we are going to be sending out a playbook. So don't worry about taking notes. You will get these slides. So we're really asking folks, as we move remotely, in response to the coronavirus, how do we really leverage this opportunity to not just kind of push everybody home, but really think about how we can work together differently, and how do we support our teams in having better meetings, being more innovative, and supporting continuous productivity and growth, even in these times of uncertainty. So this is our lens for how we look at the future of work. And today, as we move through this deck, we're really going to be using this lens to look at the different aspects of high-performing remote teams. So for us, everything really starts with a clearly defined purpose. So when we talk about purpose, what we're really talking about is just having really clear meaning, so a way that it's meaningful to the team. I've had a way to make mine, going to the next slide, and we can see a path toward impact. So what are we measuring here? It's one thing to say we're going to make transportation better, but in what way and for whom? And that lets us know what better means. But not only do we want a purpose for our overall company and our team, but also really thinking about what's the purpose of each task, what's the purpose of our meetings, and how are we creating clear value for the customer, whether that customer is an external customer, or if we're an internal department like HR or marketing, what the value for our internal customer is. So once we've really got clear on our purpose, what are we doing here? Now we have the people who are here. So as we look at the future of work, we see that people need new capacities to really thrive and create and innovate in these times of rapid change. And the 4 capacities that we look at are self-reliance, self-expression, self-regulation, and self-organization. So each of these capacities is a roll-up of some mindsets and behaviors. And if we look at self-reliance, the idea here is, if it's to be, it's up to me. I'm relying on myself to make sure every meeting I show up at is effective, that I'm clear on what I'm doing, and that I'm able to move myself forward. Self-expression, my voice, my skills, my capacities all matter, and everybody else's voice matters also. Moving into self-regulation, I'm responsible for my well-being. My emotions are mine, my physical well-being is mine. If I am feeling slighted or unseen, it's my responsibility to make something different happen. and finally, self-organization. And we really think about this, putting the ship in leadership. Are we organizing ourselves and our teams so that we're creating continuous outcomes and value for our customers? So oftentimes in organizations, we really just focus on outcomes. But behind outcomes are the behaviors that produce those outcomes. And then really importantly, behind behaviors are mindsets. And these are the basic lenses that determine how we see the world. And most of us have become familiar with the idea of a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. This is just one aspect from which we can have different types of mindsets, but it's a really useful one to take a look at. If we've got a growth mindset, we're coming from the idea that we can learn anything. When I'm experiencing failure, it's an opportunity to learn. When I'm frustrated, there's a way to move through that. And if I keep efforting and really coming with a question, I'm going to get better at something. A fixed mindset starts from kind of the place that I am working with what I already have. My abilities are fixed. I'm either smart or I'm not. I'm good at something or I'm not. And so fixed mindset, people will say things like, I'm just not good at that. Or that's just not something I know how to do. And if we fail at something with a fixed mindset, we tend to give up. And as we're moving remote, and as we're really having the opportunity to respond to lots of new input, if we're coming with a growth mindset, we're really ready to take advantage of all those new inputs and that new learning to create better outcomes and to work better with our team. But if we're coming with a fixed mindset, if I don't know how to do it, then I'm just not going to be able to. All of this new stuff coming at us just becomes opportunity for frustration and failure. So this is really one of the key mindsets that underlies all of those capacities. When we're looking out at remote teams, we place a lot of emphasis on the role of the team leaders. As a leader of a remote team, one of the most important things that you're accountable for is your team's sense of safety and their engagement level. The recent research has really shown that psychological safety is the key to high-performing teams. There's several other factors, but without psychological safety, miscommunications and missteps happen, work begins to break down. When we're on a remote team, good communication and psychological safety are even more important. Oftentimes, it's better for us to over-communicate and having that's why Slack channels and these kind of forms of really rapid communication that really let people know what we're doing, what we're up to, when things are done, asking more questions. It creates a stronger feeling of community and mitigates some of the isolation. But even more importantly, when we're working remotely, these tiny mishaps can really create conflict. And so the opportunity to really clear, is the word we use, conflict is important. So small things that happen in remote meetings are simple things like Maya and I are going to show you. So Maya, you want to start?
Sure. We're going to just do a quick role play of, I'm going to come in our Tirza. Can we have a quick talk and permission to clear something?
Yeah, sure, Maya. Now's a good time. I'm feeling pretty good and hydrated.
Great. Good. And beyond that, did you have a good run this morning or a good walk this morning? Did you exercise? How are you doing today?
Well, I actually did do a little exercise this morning for the first morning since I had my ACL surgery.
Great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So I just wanted to clear something that happened this morning. So in our team meeting, I was voicing something and you actually cut me off. And what it made me feel is that my voice wasn't valued at that moment. So I just wanted to, clear that with you and bring that up.
Yeah, Maya, I interrupt people sometimes. And I was really just so excited about that new idea. I wanted to share what I had to say about that. And I can see that I interrupted you.
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging this and acknowledging me.
So in the future, you can count on me to wait till you're done and seek to acknowledge your ideas before adding my ideas onto them.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thanks for bringing this up.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So that's a super common thing that happens in meetings, right? We, especially in remote meetings where we have delays and the communication channel isn't clear, it's really easy for us to speak over and interrupt each other. And sometimes these are just small things that pass. But if you're finding that you're holding on to an emotional hurt, like an experience of being talked over, interrupted, or unseen, it really becomes your responsibility to bring that up with the other person and clear it. And if we create an actual culture where we're continuously clearing things, what happens is we are all learning and getting feedback on who we're being. And so we're going to give you this as a format, and in the playbook we'll go into a little bit more deeply how to do this. And I'll just say that in my family, we've made this very, we've added a kind of layer of cute to it, and we sort of role play with our fingers, and we talk about having affirmative family conversations brought to you by the Fingertons. And so that's obviously a little bit juvenile for our professional teams, but finding a way to keep clearing light and easy so that when something really big does come up, we've built the muscle of clearing. So good process makes for good meetings. And so we're going to talk about a couple of different processes that you can build into your remote teams to improve the overall effectiveness. This Connect, Scan, Focus, Act format for meetings, if you take one thing away from this webinar, this is the most important. So we use this framework for a variety of things, but it really serves us well in meetings. If we look at each meeting as moving through 4 different phases: connect, where we make sure we've got everybody in the room, and we actually take a few minutes to build rapport. Then we scan, taking a review of everything we're going to cover. So even if you've already set an agenda, taking a moment to reaffirm the agenda and make sure there's nothing else that needs to come up. Or if we're seeking to make a specific decision, we can scan for everything that needs to come into that decision. Then we focus in, and this is an opportunity for us to find the most important things to talk about and to find these areas of greatest leverage. And with each area, we're focusing on what we're looking for to determine the next actions. If we move through all 4 quadrants here in every meeting, then we're starting each meeting with first getting the humans in the room and treating each other as humans. And so rather than having this kind of transactional relationship where we're just looking at each other as, little cogs in a machine, but we're actually affirming everybody's humanity, we're going to have a very different relationship. And this is a key way we begin to establish psychological safety. So there's a lot of different ways of building Connect. And Maya's going to go over a deeper one later. But even really simply taking a few minutes to ask everybody how they were, or how their weekend was, or what they're excited about today. These simple things that get everybody's voices and emotions in the room build a great deal of rapport and are really vital when we don't actually have the physical cues of seeing how everybody is. So Maya, do you want to share with us the Rosebud Dawn ritual?
Yeah, this is a great ritual that I've used with both development and non-development teams as a simple retrospective And some people know about retrospectives and agile. Sometimes they're like 2 hours long, but I actually like this as a 40 minute to maybe 60-minute online ritual. If you only have remote teams, sometimes a tool like a mural or a Miro, which allows you to have actually digital post-it notes and digital stickers to actually create a feeling like we're all doing this together. And the idea is in the first you go, what worked well this week? So in a case of you actually using a board, whether it's digital or not, everybody gets to write what worked well for them. And we do it together as a team. So it's all of us talking together about this, all of us bringing this forward. And then we can take a few minutes to just look at what came up, if everybody said that something really worked well for this week, we know we should actually continue doing that. Then the thorns is what didn't work well this week. And this is a really healthy place for people to be vulnerable and voice, this is not working for me. Or and this is not a place for saying you did this, it's more what didn't work in our system. So it's a really great place to keep tabs on what's working, what's not working. And then the buds, what can we do better? And usually the way I would do is we would look at what we could do better. And after that, we would go with our digital stickers and select 3 to 5 for each team member of the things that they really are looking to improve or wanting to actually shed light on. And then we collect all of those and actually take the team's pulse. What's really working, what's not really working. And then we commit to doing better on the what can we do better part. And every week we can actually assess, did we actually bring that into our work week? And it's a great ritual. It's fun. We can make it silly. We can put in music, even online. There's ways of doing it. But it's a really fun, different way of experiencing a good, healthy, ritualistic retrospective on a Friday. So that's my suggestion. And we'll put some more information on how to run a good roses, thorns, and buds practice in the workbook.
Okay.
Oh, and I can actually do this as well, Tirza. So just a little, this is semantics and framing, the concept of feedback versus feed forward. There's a lot of research on why feedback doesn't work. Again, we'll add a little bit more to it in the workbook. But the concept of a feed forward is really standing in the future and saying, what can we do better? If things didn't work up until now, how are we changing things? And could be a one-on-one or even in a team where we actually look at doing better. And what it does, it creates an opportunity and an excitement for people to actually improve. Again, as I said, there's a lot of research on why that works better. Also, there's some research around how different team members give feedback or feed forward, where the employees actually are looking for better feed forward or even better feedback. And nobody knows how to do it very well. So there's a lot of possibility around how you can even do it, especially when you're doing things online. So it's a great opportunity to look at how are you doing that, look at these structures within your organization.
And one thing I'd say is if we're working on a remote team, making sure that the person that you're speaking to is resourced and ready to receive, even if we're providing our feed forward in the most positive, forward-looking way, ensuring that the person's really ready and asking permission is vital to effective feed forward content. Another process that we're really excited about for remote teams is the coming on of these ways for people to engage in games with their remote teams. So the Go game has been creating team building games for over a decade, and they started out with these live in the city games, and they just recently released a remote game so that you can have just even a 30-minute experience of getting together with your team and playing games. And this sounds like, you could think of it as silly and a distraction, but fundamentally, if we have better relationships and we're excited about our team members and we're having the opportunity to get to know them and build rapport and trust, the rest of our work week goes much better. And so having an occasional Friday 30-minute game to look forward to, whether you use the Go game or you find some other way to play together. These make up for some of those other interactions we don't have when we're working remotely. The opportunity to just have a cup of coffee or pass each other in the break room, and have these little moments of share. Games are a great way to introduce fun and camaraderie into your remote team.
Yeah, and they even call it the new water cooler game, or the new remote water cooler. So it's a really cool new platform that's out there for your viewing. Oops.
So we're not going to go too deep. I'll take this.
Yeah.
We're not going to go too deep on platforms and systems, folks, because there's so many. But we will say any good remote team needs to have at their use and easy use a series of tools. So you need a video chat, like having something like Zoom where you can actually see each other is really key. Phone and just having a conference line was wonderful 20 years ago, but these days we really know that video adds a great deal more emotional content, and so we can move things along much faster. It also increases engagement and the level of presence people have at any given meeting. Having something that's running along in the background like Slack or Chatter, where you can provide continuous updates, reduces email and keeps people more engaged. The tool that you use is really up to your team. There's a variety of them, but find one that works for you. You need a project management tool. A lot of teams make it work without one when they're all working together, or some kind of simple spreadsheet where they're tracking the big things. But once we go remote, we really need a place that our team member Philip would call the one truth, where we can say, this is where things at, this is what's expected, the place where we're making clear agreements. Documents, this seems pretty obvious, having good protocols. And finally, there's a great deal of wonderful new collaborative tools out there that allow us to brainstorm together and be creative and move ideas around together in ways that go beyond the document. We've listed a few of those there. The technology around entering into remote meetings has really come a long way. And so if your team's got the budget for it, Owl Labs and various virtual reality tools are really beginning to support even more interactivity and a sense of being there. Those do tend to cost more, but if you're on a team with a budget, they're really making a huge difference. If you've been in a well-wired remote meeting room, it makes a huge difference in terms of the sense of being there with the other people. We're not going to get into work policies, but you should have one. If you've got a team of any size, especially if you're going to remote work in response to the coronavirus and you expect to then shift back to some kind of blended office plus remote, having a policy is really important. If you've already got a policy, it's a good time to review it. And also it's a good opportunity to remind people of your other HR policies around how we're expected to behave, dress, etc. Because those policies shouldn't really change as we're moving to a home work environment. We still need to treat each other with respect. We still need to show up to meetings with pants on.
A little bit about planning, and yeah, those are definitely important things to talk to your HR department, but a little bit more about planning is the difference in cadence. Especially if you're new to remote working, and you have a cadence in the office, keeping that cadence, but moving it into a more doable approach online is really important. And you know, there is something about wanting to keep the same meetings as they were face-to-face. And that's actually problematic at times because people really cannot stay on a Zoom call for very long. It's actually good to have shorter meetings, more organized. So getting into a little bit of a newer cadence of daily stand-ups and meetings and feedback and short weekly retrospectives, that would be very helpful for your team to be very productive. We brought in the agile approach. There are many, this has come from Kaizen and Six Sigma, and there's all these different approaches. Use what works for you. We'll talk a little bit more about it in our playbook, but whatever approach works for your team, you know it better. But reiterating it, thinking about, like we put in the rituals, really great to have especially when you move to remote working, a daily stand-up where you just do a quick 15 minutes video meeting. Everybody should be on their video. You can even ask people to either put their computer a little bit higher so they're standing up. But giving that experience where we just meet, we talk about the facts of what we've done, we connect really quickly. So we have that feeling that we're in the room together, especially for teams who've never done that before. I think that's a really great ritual to encode immediately, to get people's voices, and also seeing that nobody's hiding. There is a tendency, especially for people who are more introverted, to even go behind the scenes even more when we are remote working. So seeing that everybody's voices are there, that they're all are connecting, and they're all in cadence on working forward. So yeah, as I said, there's going to be more around that in the playbook. And the opportunity here also is how we're actually implementing an evolved culture, and an evolved culture of a culture of learning, which really lets us grow together as an organization. This is the idea is to move towards, if you haven't done it already, into a growing and evolving and learning organization. And this is just a very simplified, what is a culture of learning versus a culture of wrong and right. I want to actually just kind of look at the prize for the winners versus learn from what worked. Sometimes when we give the prizes only to the winners, we're actually not learning, because if things are working, we're not learning. We're just going to continue doing that. But actually, when things don't work is when we actually have the biggest opportunity to learn and evolve, like we are actually experiencing in a very visceral way right now when things are not working on our planet. There is a huge opportunity to learn on what can work, how do we evolve rapidly, how do we become more efficient, and how do we actually support everybody's learning. I think the other thing is, if things are not working, we don't ridicule the losers. We actually look at it from a systemic organizational approach and ask really good questions. Why is this not working? How do we improve together? And then the inspiration also gets people to think outside the box. And culture of learnings are extremely innovative, extremely rapid and efficient. And there's, as I said, a lot of more information we're going to put in, but there's a lot of writing around how to support that ongoing, online and offline. And so, yeah, we encourage you to look at your culture from that perspective.
So we'd love to get some voices in the room as we're really thinking about how are we learning and how are we all learning to move to remote together. And we're really looking at the role of the facilitator, the team leader, and how they're going to be supporting those quiet voices, how they're going to be ensuring communication across silos, and ensuring that people are still willing to take risks and experiment even on remote teams. So what we're going to do right now is leverage the power of Zoom and get into 3 breakout rooms. If you're able to come online and maybe turn your video on and certainly unmute, we'd love to have the opportunity for everybody to hear from each other about really maybe what are your greatest challenges with moving to remote work, and what are you most curious about learning, and if you're finding anything that's really working, especially if you're on a team that's rapidly responding to remote work. We'd love to hear from you.
There we go. We're all back.
Yeah, we're all back. That was really a wonderful conversation. I'm going to share a bit about what we talked about in our group, and then maybe Maya, you can share a bit about what came up in your group. In our group, we talked a bit about how to manage the interface between people who are kind of all in the office and having one person who, or a couple people who are out of the office. And there I really came back to this idea of capacities and our mindsets. Are we choosing to come from self-expression, from wanting to include all the voices? Or are we coming from like the person on the line isn't my responsibility? And then I also recommended sometimes it just works better to have everybody joining into one channel rather than to have several people on in one room and then somebody who's remote. And so having one experience and leveling the playing field for everybody. And then another thing that really came up was tool adoption. And my recommendation for folks who are really just moving on to tools is that you find those folks in your team who are excited about trying new things and have them really go be the explorers and try the tools and make recommendations for what they think is going to work for the whole team, rather than having the whole team try Google Hangouts and then try Zoom and try Skype and try all these different things. That kind of whiplash around different tools is really challenging for some people, not so much for others. So allowing your people who are excited to try out new tools to be the ones who go try out tools. And then once you've made some selections, creating a matrix so that people know what to use which channel for. And then only adding or switching a tool when it's become clear that there's something that's going to work better. And you've got enrollment from everybody that now's the time to switch. Maya, I'd love to hear what happened in your group.
Yeah, so we had a similar conversation on tools, and you're actually completing some of the questions around that. What we said is also talking about beyond the person that's the tool geek, also having a great facilitator, somebody that really is empowered and shines in facilitating both the meetings and also using these tools. We also talked about innovation and brainstorming and having more play with those specific tools to break the almost drudgery of Google Docs, all the regular things that we were using, because we don't have the water cooler moments. And we brought in also the Go game before. There was another really great question around how do we work with clients if this is completely new for them and they're experiencing, they're used to having sales teams coming over to them. And what do we do? And we all know that this might actually slow a lot of business. It already is. And I believe, and I think we all believe in this team and Lumen, is bringing the humanity back, checking in with your clients, seeing how they're doing, offering to help if you have more of capacities for remote working, communicating more with them. Because at the end of the day, we're all going through this right now together. This is a global thing that is happening. So actually connecting more, checking in more, is what is the best thing we can do right now. And when hopefully the pandemic slows down and we get to go back to work, the relationships that we are creating right now, the resilient relationships and this capacity to grow together and to transform together, is what is the opportunity to actually build the next relationships with clients, the better tools, the better companies. So coming back to this conversation about relationships, I think is really important. It's definitely something that came out from our conversation. Philip, I think to you.
Yes, and some of the similar tones came up. I think we really talked about the importance of replacing face-to-face and really spending that time connecting and really having that the foundation for everything. And then really so that there is engagement and even to the point of over communicating, and then having really clear agreement structures, right? So that you have agreement structures in place that give you sort of the solidity and in a way also create the psychological safety. And when you have that, then there's also an opportunity, and we can shift it even into the positive around the opportunity to engage people from anywhere. I mean, even right now we're hitting multiple time zones, and Denise was sharing about working with a nonprofit and saying how delighted it was to actually be able to have people from around the world that you can now connect with, right? Because you don't have to be limited to a physical space together, and you can get some more talent and other people that you would not normally have met. And I see my friend Marianne Miller is on the line as well, and she's in a nonprofit as well. And with her, we've worked remotely most of the time. We worked together over the years as well because of being in totally different areas of the US at the time. But this is some of the positive side of it as well, that it's opening up new possibilities.
Thank you, Philip. So this was a really rich share, and we are going to use all of the questions that we heard to improve this deck and develop it into a playbook. We will be getting that out next week. We're also going to be offering a just a 6-hour training course for those people who are looking to become better remote facilitators. We'll go deep on each of these different areas, and this is really going to be designed for those people who are looking to drive performance and connectivity on their teams as they build a remote team or are really just dealing with the immediate situation. We're going to keep doing another webinar, at least one more webinar like this, where we go deeper on some of the things that came up today. And then we'll also have a series of facilitators that are available to support your teams right now in moving to remote work and developing some of the agreement structures and the rituals and cadences that they need to be successful as we go. And so if you would be supported by any of those things, we'd love to hear from you. And you will be hearing from us next week. And that brings us to my final tip for remote meetings. Start on time, end early. Remote meetings are even more challenging for people. A full hour is really the most people can manage. 90 minutes is the absolute maximum. And I really recommend that you, as a facilitator and as a leader of a remote team, make it a practice to start promptly on time and end your meetings a few minutes early. Thanks, everybody.